Do you struggle to sleep at night? Perhaps it's because your partner needs something to combat their snoring problem. Are you confused about which supplements you should be taking? Do you want to find the right kind of exercise equipment for your home? Or maybe you're just looking for the best electric shaver. Which has hundreds of product reviews to keep you fit, eat well, sleep better, and everything in between. Just head to which.co.uk/health to read our expert insight and independent reviews. Get expert advice and recommendations to live your best life every day with Which.
It's budget day, so what does the Chancellor's announcement mean for you? We'll unpack it all on today's episode of the Which Money podcast. Hello, I'm Lucia Ariano, and with me today I have Jenny Ross, Which Money editor.
Hello, good to be here.
Great to have you, Jenny, and also Tom Selby, Director of Public Policy at AJ Bell. Welcome back. It's so good to have you both on today. Now, we'll be discussing the big headlines today, but also we want to hear from you. Now, next week we'll be answering all your questions about what the budget means for you, so please do get in touch. Email us your questions to podcasts@which.co.uk. So now then, where shall we start? I wanted to ask you what you were expecting, but actually a lot was leaked, wasn't it, before today?
Well, I guess one thing that nobody saw coming was basically the entire contents of the budget to effectively be released before Rachel Reeves had even got near to beginning her speech. So that threw everyone for starters. But then when it actually comes to the contents of the speech, yes, I mean, we have had nigh on 3 months. I think I came back from my summer holidays actually at the end of August, and already there was a sort of healthy pile of budget rumour related press releases in my inbox. So we've had 3 months of run up to this, during which time there have been so many options mooted, put forward, sort of tried and tested to see how they might land. So I think we've heard pretty much everything that came, that ended up featuring in the speech today. I think there's probably more that we'd heard in the run up that then didn't get featured. But yeah, by and large, very few surprises from my point of view.
Yeah, the OBR leak felt like the perfect way to end the leakiest pre-budget period I think any of us have ever seen.
It's been quite a dramatic day, hasn't it, today?
Very, very dramatic. The last thing that Rachel Reeves needed clearly was something to make the government or the OBR look incompetent. But yeah, as Jenny says, most of the stuff that was announced today had been well trailed, and we knew it was coming. Clearly, a very difficult budget in lots of ways, particularly for savers, pension savers, investors as well. We'll come on to talk about all those things. But we definitely got the smorgasbord of announcements that had been threatened / promised to us.
So let's start diving into some of those headlines then. And I think perhaps one of the biggest ones is on income tax thresholds, which will be frozen for an extra 3 years until 2031. So this means that you could end up paying more tax. Jenny, can you explain why?
Yeah, this is the phenomenon known as fiscal drag, which we've all become all too well aware of in recent years, because actually that freeze has been in place since, I believe it's the 2022 tax year. Now, in sort of so-called normal times, you would expect that income tax threshold to increase every year by inflation. But we're now looking at, 2022 to 2031, like the best part of a decade, in which they remain exactly the same. So there's no increase in the actual rate of tax you pay, but because those thresholds are not budging, whenever you get a pay rise, that bit more of your pay is becoming subject to income tax. So yeah, it's variously referred to as a stealth tax as well, because on paper it doesn't look like anything's changing, but you will still feel it, and the impact is really quite dramatic. So there are around 8 million people who are now paying higher or additional rate tax. That's a rise of 45% since the freeze began. Rachel Reeves had originally said that from 2028 we would see those thresholds increasing again and the freeze would finally thaw, but clearly she decided in the end they weren't in a position to do that. So millions of us will be feeling the effects in the coming years.
Otherwise known as the stealth tax, is that right?
Yes, it's certainly being referred to as that, because as I said, nothing's changing on paper, but more tax will be coming out of your pay packet as your pay increases.
Doesn't feel particularly stealthy anymore, does it?
No, I think it's very
everyone's
out
very aware of the fact that this is happening.
To it, yeah.
And there have been changes to dividends, property and savings incomes. So people earning from those will also be paying more. Do you want to take this on? What's the context here? And, how is it changing?
So the government are targeting the tax that you pay on your savings above a certain level. So there's an extra 2 percentage points on what you pay. So it's income tax at the moment. So it'll be whatever your income tax rate is plus 2% over and above your savings allowance. They're also going for dividends as well. So increasing the dividend tax rate at the bottom and middle level. So not at the top level as well. We've got some awful numbers there. I think one of the rates is 39.35%, which is nice and memorable. I mean, clearly all part of the Chancellor's efforts to try and make the numbers add up while also trying to hit those who are the wealthiest and protect working people, as she'd say. But some quite painful changes there. Now, clearly, as the dividend tax rate goes up, as the savings tax rate goes up, both of those reforms should encourage more people to look to invest through ISAs. That will be a natural reaction. So ISAs are completely tax-free. They've cut the cash ISA allowance, or they're going to, which I'm sure we'll come on to. So I think this is all part of this broader strategy to get more people to invest for the long term through ISAs. So if you don't have an ISA, you're going to pay more tax. But if you save through an ISA, then all of that growth is tax-free.
Well, before we move on from tax, let's hear what Rachel Reeves did have to say about the topic on tax in the Commons.
As a result of the tax reforms I have made today, I can confirm that I will not be increasing national insurance, the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT. And I have kept everyone's contribution as low as possible through reforms to make our tax system stronger, closing loopholes, ensuring that the wealthiest pay their share, and building a tax system that is fairer for the future as our economy changes.
And for the sake of balance, here's how the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, closed out her speech.
This country works when you make the country work for them. Only the Conservatives are on their side, Madam Deputy Speaker, and our plan for them is simple. Bring down energy costs, cut spending, cut tax, back business, and get Britain working again.
Now, another big change today then was on ISAs. Now, we heard Rachel Reeves confirm these reforms in today's budget. What's going to be different and what's the reasoning behind it, Jenny?
Well, these rumours have been brewing for even longer than the rest of the pre-budget rumours. I think most of the year has been spent with people trying to second guess where that cash ISA allowance will eventually land. I think £4,000 has been on the cards, £10,000. Ultimately, Rachel Reeves landed on £12,000 as the new limit for cash ISAs. So the overall ISA limit will remain at £20,000 a year. Only 12k of that from April 2027 can be in cash. Currently, it's entirely up to you how you use that 20k. It can be split any which way you want between cash and stocks and shares. But there's a big drive from the government to get more people investing, and preferably in British companies. So that is the rationale behind it. Whether that actually plays out in practice remains to be seen. But that's been one of the strong sources of pushback, right, Tom, is that a reduced cash ISA limit does not necessarily equal more people flocking to invest their money, because there are many more barriers in place for people, not wanting to take risk with their money, for example. It remains to be seen how that will play out. But the ISA landscape does remain as complicated as it ever has been, I would say, Tom, and potentially more so as a result of this, because there is going to be this carve out for over 65. So if you're 65 or over, when this all changes in 2027, you will still be able to max out the full 20k allowance purely in cash if you so choose.
Yeah, that's right. Far more complicated from 2027 than it is at the moment. And I'd say, frankly, looking at the suite of measures that have been announced, I'd describe it as quite shambolic. There's absolutely no evidence that reducing the cash ISA allowance to £12,000 will make any difference to the amount of people who invest for the long term. You're hardening that barrier that exists between holding cash and investing in a stocks and shares ISA, when really you should be bringing those barriers down, making it easier for people who have built up a rainy day pot to then move on to investing. You're going to create a scarcity issue around cash ISAs. So there's a kind of buy now while stocks last period between now and 2027, where people might actually go for cash ISAs when they might be better off investing in a stocks and shares ISA. And I'd say there's every chance, depending on some of the detail, and we don't have any detail on how this is going to be implemented, but there's every chance that the Chancellor will have announced a set of reforms that are supposed to encourage more people to invest, and we'll see the numbers come through in the next 12 months, and you'll see more people go into cash ISAs. It doesn't make any sense to me. The carve out for over 65s doesn't make any sense to me either, to be honest. I don't know why 65, because the state pension age is 66, so I don't know where the number 65s come from. And as we discussed before the show, if you're older, if you're retired, then you're normally going to be drawing down from your assets. So why do people who are over 65 need protection for a £20,000 cash ISA allowance? The whole thing doesn't tie together to me. It all feels disjointed, and it's not clear exactly what the strategy is, but what we're left with is a more complicated, more difficult to navigate ISA landscape than we had before, which is exactly the opposite of what we wanted, and it's exactly the opposite of what Labour said it was going to do before the election. They said they were going to simplify ISAs and try to encourage retail investing, and they've done the exact opposite.
There was a mention of the lifetime ISA being reformed, right, Tom, as well, on top of all of this. So I think that's being looked at from 2026. Eventually that will give way to another product designed to help to something else, another potentially ISA related product. So watch this space on that front. But yes, if you do have a lot of money sitting around that you want to keep in cash desperately, and you want to maintain that tax-free shelter, then you have got best part of 18 months to max it out until the change kicks in April 2027.
Some good news for the not quite the over 65s, but over 66s if you're on the state pension. It's good news that it will be rising. Jenny, what's going on here?
Yes, this is all down to the triple lock, the mechanism by which the state pension increases every year. So every April it goes up by a minimum of 2.5%, but from next year it will be going up by 4.8% because that was the wage growth figure for the relevant period. So what that means in practice, if you are getting the full new state pension from April, you will be getting just over £12,547. That is pretty healthy increase of £575 year on year. But significantly, that is just a hair's breadth away from the personal allowance, which is the amount you can earn within a tax year before you have to start paying tax on that income. So that currently stands at £12,570, so 20 odd quid above what the new state pension will be. So we're really not too far away now from people whose only source of income is a state pension having to pay tax on that income.
Tom, what do you think? Could the state pension be subject to tax in the near future?
Well, I mean, it will be on current trajectory. And I know Rachel Reeves said in her statement that they'll look to address that issue. Now, I don't think they're going to address it in the way that Rishi Sunak was looking to before the general election, by having a higher personal allowance for retirees versus working people. I think what they'll be looking at is making it simpler to pay that tax. So at the moment, there are people whose state pension entitlements are above the personal allowance already because they built up generous entitlements under the old system, and when that happens, you don't have any other income, you need to fill out what's called a simple assessment form, something that lots of people won't be particularly familiar with, but it means that you'll end up with a tax bill at the end of the year, which can be quite difficult, particularly if you're a reasonably low income household and perhaps that state pension is your only income. So I would assume they're looking at a more automated system for you to pay that tax, but it will mean that people, as you say, in receipt of the full state pension will pay tax. That's clearly a good thing for those people, because you're being pushed up above a tax band by a very generous increase, and then you're having a little bit of that taken away. So you're still getting something, it's just a little bit less because of the income tax that you pay. But I feel like I've said this on this podcast many times. At some point, somebody is going to have to come clean with the electorate about what the triple lock is trying to achieve. Nobody's ever said what the aim of the policy is. It's clearly brought lots of people out of pensioner poverty, which is a good thing, but if you just keep on ratcheting up the state pension every year, eventually it'll be worth average earnings and the bill will be astronomical and unsustainable. So I suspect this government won't look to get us on a pathway to ending the triple lock, but it will have to happen at some point. Just arithmetically, it will have to happen at some point, but it'll be a brave politician who does it, I think.
And in other pension news, I mean, some not so good news. A cap will be introduced for pension salary sacrifice schemes. Now, before we started recording today, we were having some talk about whether or not people, really know what this is. So shall we start there with some context? What is this is really your area, Tom, isn't it? What is a pension salary sacrifice?
So this is just where you give up a portion of your salary that goes into your pension scheme. Your employer will pay something in there as well, and then that makes up your overall pension contribution. So your employer effectively pays your contribution on your behalf. So say if you earn £32,000, you could have that salary reduced to £2,000, and then your employer will pay that £2,000 straight into your pension scheme. Now that's attractive for employers and employees because you not only get income tax relief, which everyone gets when they contribute to a pension, but you also don't pay national insurance on those contributions. So it's extra valuable from a tax perspective. So Rachel Reeves clearly decided that was a bit too generous. So she's announced, not immediately, so in 2029, so quite a long way down the track, that there's going to be a £2,000 cap on what you can pay into a pension through salary sacrifice. So you'll be able to pay £2,000 a year in that way. And then after that point, then your employer and you will pay national insurance on that money. So I think the big unanswered question around this is how are employers going to react? So the concern out there is that these schemes tend to be among the more generous ones. So these are employers who are looking to help their employees save for retirement. And if they get clobbered with an extra tax hit, then they might think actually maybe we'll look to level down our pension provision, which clearly wouldn't be a particularly good thing. But the saving to the Treasury is somewhere in the region of £5 billion. So you can see why they've gone for that. But it's another hit to lots of people's retirement incomes, and I think you're talking about roughly a third of employers offer salary sacrifice schemes in the private sector, so a decent number of people will be affected. Not everyone, because clearly if you save less than £2,000 you'll get it all exactly the same. There'll still be lots of good reasons to use salary sacrifice. So for some people, for example, it will help them get below certain thresholds that get them other benefits as well, but you just need to be careful if you're using it, because when you're reducing your salary you can also lose access to some benefits if you're at certain salary levels. So something that you need to think about if you're going to do it, but something that will affect quite a few people in a few years' time.
But just to be super, super clear, this won't affect everyone who's saving for retirement in their workplace pension. As you said, Lucia, there has been quite a lot of confusion about this because that cap, as Tom said, it applies to contributions via salary sacrifice, so a specific way of making pension contributions into your workplace scheme. It's not a cap on contributions full stop into your pension. So as we were saying before, the what's known as the annual allowance will remain. So that stands at £60,000 per tax year. That's the amount you can pay into all your pensions combined while still benefiting from tax relief. That will be unchanged. And as Tom said as well, only around a third of schemes offer salary sacrifice. So it's not the default means, default means of paying into a pension by any means. But it will still have considerable impact. Otherwise, the Chancellor wouldn't be making the change, and there will potentially be that knock-on of people being disincentivised to save for their pension, and employers rethinking the perks that they offer to employees. So there could be an element of unintended consequences. But just to, I guess, sound a note of reassurance amid all of this, that it's not a drastic cap on the amount that you can contribute to a pension, full stop.
Yeah, just to add to that, your employer will, regardless of how they do or don't restructure their arrangements, they'll still have to offer you a pension scheme under automatic enrolment rules, and that'll still need to meet the minimum contribution requirement. So you should still be automatically enrolled into a pension. It just may be that your employer chooses to do it in a slightly different way to how they're doing it at the moment.
Yeah, it's all to do with the mechanics of how the payments actually end up in your workplace pot, whether it comes out of your wages after they've already been paid to you, or like, you know, you sacrifice that money and your employer pays it in on your behalf. So it does get a little bit fiddly. But yes, as Tom says, it doesn't come in until 2029, so people do have a bit of time to get their heads around it. Yeah.
Well, keeping on tax then for a minute, there were no sweeping changes to council tax, as there might have been rumoured, but there is a new so-called mansion tax.
That's right. This is effectively going to be a council tax surcharge for properties over a certain amount. So the threshold is £2 million. It's going to kick in from 2028 and apply to properties worth above that threshold in England. So those worth more than £2 million will be charged £2,500 a year, and those worth more than £5 million will be charged £7,500. So this is really designed to address some of the quirks and, like, you know, unfairnesses really in the current council tax system, where a property in one part of the country, I think Rachel Reeves referenced Darlington, can be paying more than a huge property in Mayfair, for example. So they're trying to balance things out a little bit, but without really tackling the wider problems with council tax. So it's not going to be a sort of top to toe reform, but yes, higher value properties will be hit by this. But clearly they've given themselves a bit of time to work through all the new valuations that are going to have to happen to process this.
And now's probably as good a time as any to mention inheritance tax. Were there any changes here, Tom?
So another deep freeze. So the freeze in inheritance tax allowances are going to go on for an extra year, I think just beyond 2030. So that'll be more people clearly pulled into the inheritance tax net. There was also a very technical point around the decision to bring unspent pensions into IHT from April 2027. So something just to make it a bit easier for personal representatives to pay the tax bill that they may need to pay once pensions come into IHT. So all of that is still incredibly difficult and problematic. They haven't adjusted the approach. So from April 2027, pensions are still going to come into IHT, but they've just made the process a little bit easier for people.
Well, before we start to wrap things up, because at the end it would be good to just talk about some of the kind of miscellaneous bits that we haven't mentioned so far. But I would just love to hear, you know, aside from all the leaks, is this kind of what you were expecting? You know, how has the industry responded? How's AJ Bell responded, Tom?
Yes, it is. I mean, as soon as we heard the word smorgasbord, we had a fair idea of what this was going to be. I do think quite a lot of it is quite disappointing, not just in the ISA world, but I think that the approach they've taken there is reflected in some of the council tax stuff and elsewhere. It feels like they're layering on complexity in lots of areas when there are loads of areas of the tax benefit system and the ISA system where you could look to do something much braver and bolder to try and make things simpler and more sensible. Clearly, from the Chancellor's point of view, the good news is that some of the fiscal numbers were a bit better than expected. So she's managed to increase her headroom against which her fiscal rules are measured to over £20 billion. So she'll be hoping at least that she won't be coming back for more next time. Now, obviously, that was promised at the last budget and wasn't delivered. But with that extra bit of flexibility, she might be, at least the next budgets might not be as painful as the previous two have been. But it really does feel like fiddling around the edges with a lot of this stuff. And whenever you do that, things get more complicated.
Jenny, was it much of what you expected?
I think fiddling around the edges sort of sums it up, doesn't it, Tom? Because on some fronts, I think a lot of people, maybe a lot of listeners, will be actually breathing a sigh of relief, because there were some big shake-ups rumoured that didn't come to pass, but that did cause a lot of panic in the build-up. So I'm thinking changes to the rules around the amount of tax-free cash you can take from your pension. Tom, you will know all too well that this year and last year sparked a real frenzy of people actually deciding, oh, okay, now I need to take this now, just in case they do crack down and reduce the amount that you can take tax-free. So that uncertainty did nudge people into making decisions that they might not necessarily have made otherwise. But still, on balance, yes, the impact will be less than had that actually come to pass. And similarly, we touched on inheritance tax, but there were some there was some speculation that the Chancellor would go further than last year. Obviously, last year she brought pensions. She announced that pensions would be brought within the scope of inheritance tax. There was some speculation around, okay, is she going to go further and reduce the amount that you can pass on tax-free in your lifetime? That didn't happen. But yeah, the fact remains, we were talking about stealth tax in relation to income tax, but that's exactly what's happening with inheritance tax, in that those thresholds have been frozen for years and years and years. I think it will be like best part of 20 years until that potentially gets lifted, and that means that more people. It is still a very small minority of people who pay it. I do just need to highlight that, but inevitably more people will be dragged into the net because those thresholds are frozen.
Well, we've covered so many of the big headlines, but let's touch on some of the things we might have missed. To my mind, the milkshake tax comes up because that just seems really quite a random one. But I'll let you take the floor here. Tom, do you want to start us off?
So other than the milkshake tax, which is obviously the big one, I think lots of employers and workers will have been focused on the national living wage rise. Now they'll have very different perspectives on that, I suspect. So for those in kind of low earning employment at the moment, the fact that is going to go up significantly will be a real positive. I think the opponents of this government will say actually that's another big cost on businesses, and clearly there's kind of push and pull going on there, and there's an obvious danger that if you raise costs on businesses, then the number of young people actually getting employed at all might be reduced. But if you're in employment and you're at that national minimum wage, that national living wage salary at the moment, then clearly that's going to be a positive boost to your income.
Yeah, I think the stat I've got here is that increase is going to push up the earnings of a full-time worker on the national living wage by £900. So they're going to be getting £12.71 an hour from April. Other bits of good news: we've got freeze on NHS prescription charges in England. So the cost of a single prescription will remain at £9.90. Similarly, rail fares. I jumped for joy at this for the first time in 30 years. Rail fares, including season tickets, are going to be frozen.
It's about time, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, yes. So that apparently is going to be saving around £300 a year on the most expensive routes. We've also got some good news for energy bills. I'm not sure exactly what form this is going to take, but there will be a levy of some sort that is going to reduce people's bills by an average of £150. So definitely not to be sniffed at. And the amount will be more for poorer households as well. And then other than that, if you drive an electric car, you will be facing a road charge of 3 pence per mile from April 2028. Plug-in hybrid drivers, you're going to be facing an extra 1.5 pence per mile. I think that probably wraps us up for the miscellaneous section, but it does feel quite a bits and bobs style budget all round, I think.
I do feel like there are always quite a few things that we end up sweeping up at the end of these podcasts. Well, don't forget, if you're left scratching your head today by anything the Chancellor announced, by anything we mentioned or didn't mention, then we do have a special Q&A coming next week. And so you just need to email your questions to podcast@which.co.uk. And thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Which, the UK's consumer champion. You can find plenty more advice about what we discussed today in the show notes. There you'll also find a link to become a Which member for 50% off the usual price, an offer exclusively available to you, our podcast listeners. Joining Which will not only give you access to our product reviews, our app, one-to-one personalised buying advice, and every issue of Which magazine across the year, but you'll also be helping us to make life simpler, fairer and safer for everyone. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode of Which Money, Which Shorts, or any other podcast that we make for you. And if you want to get in touch with us, then follow us on social media @Which UK or drop us an email to podcast@which.co.uk. See you next time.
If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.